Welcome to your iconic image. If you want to take control of your image and be a power player in your space, then this is the show for you. Here we will arm you with tools and information to help you grow your brand on purpose. I'm your host, Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Now let's dive into today's episode. Christine Johnson has an impressive resume in TV production, producing live sporting events, packages for the Jay Leno Show, extra, and a feature film. She was also a field producer for the Les Paul 100th anniversary celebration, serves on the National Broadcasting Society chapter board, among other things, and has helped many students go on to have careers in the industry. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Marlana.
So here's the thing. A lot of people think TV production, movies, all that kind of stuff, glamorous. It's got to be a glamorous world. Is it, or are you going to burst their bubble?
I'm going to burst your bubble. It's it's glamorous that you get to travel. But unfortunately, my travel kind of was hotel, arena, airport. There were occasionally, we got to go in early. I would go into San Francisco early so I could visit my friend Allison, and my brother lived there at the time. So, there were some perks to it, but TV production's very, very, very hard, very long hours. We're talking 12 to 15-hour days. And, you're crawling around on the floor. Well, in my case, if you're at an arena, you're crawling around trying to find places to shoot. And so it's definitely not glamorous. I can kind of sum it up the way my mom used to say to me, why don't you ever buy nice clothes? Because I crawl around on the floor and, getting dirty while I'm at work. So I'm not getting nice clothes. So
when you first started out, what about the industry surprised you? And were there stuff that you weren't really prepared for?
I would say the majority of it I wasn't prepared for. So, I absolutely love my alma mater. I have 2 degrees from there, but they did not prepare me for what this industry was like at all. It was okay, we know it's a lot of work, but they didn't really get into what happens, if there's you're not agreeing with people, you're working with people you don't care for, or, you'll work 3 weeks without a day off, and, you'll get treated not well sometimes. And, I was, I was in, I started in the 80s, late 80s in production. And, I was basically became the first woman that produced professional wrestling. So for me, it was kind of different because it was how do I explain it? Nobody prepares you for being around all men. Not that I was
Right.
oh my God, I'm the only woman around all these men, but they don't really prepare you for, what kind of an environment that would be. Let's put it that way.
Was it difficult to establish, as a producer, this is kind of your domain with all these men that you're working with?
Was it difficult to establish? Yes and no. I think you always have people that you work with that, are very nice and professional. And I think then you have people that you work with that are, not like the greatest people. And they I think basically they just treat everybody like crap. So for me, that was an eye-opening experience, because I was given there was a lot of kickback that came my way, because, some of the boys didn't really, respond to a woman telling them what to do. And, it's still a good old boy. It's still a boys' world. So, it's male dominated. They don't, you really don't see a woman working in that unless she's in the ring. So,
Right. In general, how do you think things have changed for women in the world of television production, or have they?
Gosh, I really can't, I really can't say, because I don't think it's changed in some ways. I still think women are definitely singled out. We have to work twice as hard. the still boys will be boys attitude still seems to prevail, which is very disheartening. So I think in that way, I think things have gotten a tiny bit better with the Me Too movement, but not where we should be. Let's put it that way. So I think, in wrestling, I've been backstage a couple of times since I was fired, because our company was sold. So, there you do see women backstage. I'm not really seeing a lot of women in the upper tiers of that. So as far as like wrestling goes, I'm not really sure. I mean, I think it was 2 years ago, NHL had the first all-woman crew, which was, I mean, why did it take that long for it to happen? 2019, I think it was. So stuff like that is, when you see things like that and you're like, oh, well, this is the first all-woman crew. Well, like, why didn't that happen before? Like, why does it take until 2019 for that to happen? And it's that whole thing, like girls don't know sports. So I think in that way, I think it's starting to change, but it's changing in a way that's like, look what we did, so it's not so much we're trying to progress and we're trying to better ourselves. It's like we're trying to put a band-aid on it as quickly as possible so that people will see that we're being progressive.
Because I know you've dealt with a lot of students over the years and things like that. Yeah. Have most of your students been men wanting to get into the industry, or has it become more split?
No. It was, for a while, I think it was like 60-40, and then it kind of evened out. And then it was like a little bit more women than men. And then it kind of went back to the 60-40. So I think it's, I also think in university, it depends on what teachers you have. So I think if, you have teachers that are discouraging women to go into the industry or to be in production and that kind of stuff, I think then that kind of sets the tone. And I think for me, like I was, I'd have to say I was a little bit harder on the women in my class because, we would have talks like there's no crying in TV. We don't do that. If you're going to do that, go do it in the bathroom because, men perceive that as weak. I'm not saying crying is a weakness because it's not. I cry when I get frustrated. I'm like, okay, I'm done, so I think it's, I think for, I think for women, it's, I was, when we were carrying flats around and stuff, I would tell the girls, like, don't tell me you're going to break a nail or anything, because we don't want to set that precedent. We don't want anybody to have any kind of, hold over you, so to speak. Like, don't play oh, I'm a girl, I'm not lifting anything. So I think in that way, I mean, I have a lot of really, really successful students, which is amazing. I mean, I have Emmy Award winners and, I have kids that have started their own production companies, two that have their own ESPN radio station. I have a student I taught that's going into the Olympics for the fourth time. I have one of my girls just dropped her first single. So, that was kind of exciting. And she did her first music video. So like, they're all I have another student that from like the first time I taught, he, works on Broadway and has, works at the Schubert theaters. So I have a lot of students. They were very, very driven, which was amazing. And it was great to work with them. But I think the thing that they always appreciated, even though if I was really hard on them, they would always say, but we knew that you were hard on us because you cared about us and you wanted us to succeed. Because I always told them, I'll never set you up to fail. That's a bad teacher to do that. So,
and I think that, especially back in the day, I can't speak to it so much now, that what you were doing was actually a service to them, because I feel like more stuff got thrown at us as women to see at what point we would break.
Absolutely. And I can, honestly, I think like when I got promoted, it was almost like, it was like, oh, well, she's starting over again, so we have to test her again, which it just, to me, was just like soul crushing. I've been doing this. I've been working my ass off. Why am I at this point once again? So that was a little like, ew, that was icky feeling. Cause then you start to question the relationships you have with people, like, are these people really my friends, or are they just like sitting here waiting for me to fail? And when people are waiting for me to fail, I'll I'm bound and determined to prove them wrong every step of the way.
So, how did you navigate all of that?
I cried in the bathroom a lot. So, um, I have I have a very strong mother who unfortunately heard a lot of the stuff that I went through. She didn't hear everything, but she heard my tales of the road when I was on the road and needed somebody to talk to. So I had a good support system with that. There were a few females on the road that, we could kind of commiserate and kind of go off on our own and do our own thing. So I know when I was in WCW, like if I needed to just get away for like 10 minutes, I'd go hide in the girls' locker room. So the Nitro girls were like, oh, okay, you just need a rest from it. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna sit over here. And they were very sweet. But yeah, so for me it was more like I was in constant survival mode, and that I was in constant survival mode for about 15 years, which
Wow.
was which took its toll on me, and it still is. So that's something that I battle with, because you're in that fight or flight constantly. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, or you're waiting to come back at somebody with some who's making some nasty remark about you, or you know it was like a crapshoot. You just didn't know what was going to happen from one day to the next. So it was really a lot of rolling with the punches, and that puts you in that fight or flight. You have to survive. And I've always been a survivor. So I think, whether that, whether that was good or bad, I don't know.
So, if women are going through that now, what would be your advice to them?
I would say, don't lose yourself, because I did. So I think staying grounded as much as you can, and whatever people in your life keep you grounded, I think that's really the best way to go. I think that you always have to remember where you came from. So for me, I was always the PA that got soup thrown at her, and was called bitch over the intercom system, and so I always remember that. I'm not like, oh, I'm this, I'm the live producer now. So, I don't like to, I'm a big person that I don't like to pull rank on somebody. I think that's really, a bad manager does that. But I think sometimes when it comes to the point where you're being disrespected, I think I've done it twice, I think, in my lifetime. And it doesn't make me feel good. So, because I don't feel like I really should have to do that, because I don't think a man would have to be like, hey, listen, I'm producing this show. So, and I hate doing that. I think it just makes, it puts you in that hysterical woman category, which, is horrible.
Yeah.
So, not saying that women are hysterical, but that's the word that men like to tend to use, is you're being hysterical. Yeah. So
I'll show you hysterical. No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So what would you say are the best and worst parts of TV production?
Gosh, I think the best part is, well, I didn't realize I was an adrenaline junkie until I started doing live TV. So I guess I was. Not that I'm going to go like parachute out of a plane or anything, because I would never do that. But I think the best thing was, honestly, the people, because we were like a family, maybe like a highly dysfunctional family, but it was a family. And, I loved them, and they saw you at your best and at your worst. And I think that, and they loved you anyway, or they hated you, whatever week it was, so everybody was pretty passionate about everything. I think when I was working, I was always criticized of, Christina that's what they would always say on my review. Christina is extremely passionate about what she does. Is that a bad thing? Apparently they thought it was. I don't know. So I think I loved what I was doing. I didn't exactly like the content I was producing. I didn't even know anything about wrestling when I got involved in it. So I liked what I did. I liked traveling. I thought that was really awesome. I met some awesome people that I'm still friends with, which is amazing. The cons, there's very long hours. You have no personal life. I was on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It becomes obsessive. It takes over your life. And that was the only job I allowed to do that. And I will never do it again. So
Mhm.
I think the good thing I learned out of that was saying no. I think that's a powerful word to learn. And I still struggle with that sometimes because I always want to help everybody. So I'm like, sure, I can help, but so I think like, the best thing was I got a degree in TV and film. I got to actually use it. That was fantastic. I did it for 15 years. I traveled all over the world. Um, I think that was amazing. And I got to, it was a creative outlet for a while. I did special projects for a while where I basically went out and shot packages and put stuff together to kind of build a character's persona. So I liked that part of it.
Mm.
I didn't like going to the airport every week. I mean, I would be so exhausted. Literally, I would cry on the way to the airport. Sometimes I'd be like, I just want to stay home. But I think anybody gets frustrated like that with a job. So, it's like a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Tell us some of the things for people that don't know what's the difference in producing, let's say, a live
Mhm.
thing for TV versus a taped something.
Well, if we're talking about live events, period. So from my experience, I mean, we did live to tape, which of course they don't use tape anymore, but we still call it that. So
Right.
live to tape.
It's like film, we use the term
Right.
film and
We're at live to tape, you're just shooting it in the order that it's going to appear, and then you're leaving holes so that you can plug stuff in. So I did one show that was live to tape, and then I did pay-per-views that were, live. Um, I think anywhere, I mean, the live to tape is like, you're like, okay, if something screws up, I can go fix it in editing, hopefully, even though that's the evil word to use, fix it in editing. You can't fix everything in editing.
right. Same thing with photography, fix it in post.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like whatever there is there. So, um, so I think that, I don't know. I think in that way, um, you know, live to tape was a little easier. When it's live, you're on the hot seat, and anything that you screw up, it's like, well, you walk out of the truck, you're like, I'm done. There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to keep rolling with the punches. So I think I was good at that because that's kind of the way I lived my life. So was just like, okay, what's coming next. So for me, that was, I enjoyed it, and it was definitely, something I felt I was good at. So I really liked that. It's different. Live sports is different from producing, like a TV show, because when you're producing a TV show, it's all about money.
Mhm.
I mean, although I did deal with budgets, I had a budget for each show. I was more like dealing with creative stuff, and like, we need this to look this way. And the director dealt with more of the technical stuff. So, you know, uh, I enjoyed it. It was definitely a rush. It was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of pain sometimes, but,
It seems like producing a live show would be a lot of stress.
um, I'll tell you, here's what I always used to tell my students. If you're not feeling nervous before a show, you're doing something wrong. Um, the very first pay-per-view I produced, I stood at the bottom of the steps, and I literally thought I was going to throw up all over the place. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do it. And I'm like, but I had that voice in the back of my head going, everybody thinks you can't do it. And I walked up the steps, and as soon as I counted from 10 down, I was fine, because you can't do anything after that. You're in the hot seat. So you have to let it go. So I think, once I got over that, um, I still had butterflies in my stomach every time I did a show. And you should, you
Mhm.
don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know everything by any means. So, every show that I did, I learned something. Or I like to think I learned something. So, in that way, I don't know. I mean, in that way, I think I think it was, that's good. That's a good thing to feel that way.
Does a crew help make or break it, or is it still pretty much on the producer?
I definitely think the crew helps make or break it. I mean, it's not just like a producer, it's not like my show, it's our show, like if there's one piece of the wheel missing, if there's like a little spoke of the wheel missing, it all falls apart. So, if I don't have good camera guys, or if I don't have a good director or good Chiron, or, whatever we're working with, we can't do anything. So it's never my show this, my show that. It's our show, and it's a team effort. And, it takes everybody to, to make the product. So, so that's,
what would you say is the craziest thing that you ever had to do as a producer?
Wow. Oh,
because I know there's been a lot of crazy. So
there's been a ton of crazy. Craziest thing I had to do as a producer, though. God, I don't know. I think everything.
Okay, how about just in your career in general?
In my career, well, I mean, having to go into the girls' locker room to check this one girl's shorts because they were too short and I was the only woman. So they're like, you have to go in and check her shorts, and I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, you have to go check her shorts to make sure they're not too short. So when she bends over, I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, oh, come on, you have to do it. Yeah. I'm like, fine, I'm going to go do it. So I would go do that. And I walked in and I just remember this girl was just crazy. No, I won't mention her name, but I would walk into the locker room and she would just be totally naked in like stripper heels. And I'd have to talk to her like that. Can you please put on your costume so I can see what it looks like? I don't need that stuff. Just like I don't need to see the boys running around naked either. Yuck. Right. I just don't need that. So, I mean, in that way, it was very much a weird environment because you're like, I don't know if, I don't even know how to explain it. You keep thinking oh, this is wrestling, but it's still a company. It's like your office and all these wackadoo things are happening at your office that are totally inappropriate.
It's kind of like a mix of company, circus, and reality show.
It's a carnival. That's what my mom used to call it, the carnival.
Yeah.
And it is definitely a carnival. I mean, they speak Carney, for God's sake. So, it definitely is. I mean, it's honestly, I always would tell people it's far more interesting backstage than it is what's going on in the ring. I mean, there was so much stuff going on backstage. So I think, and I think at one point they were trying to put hidden cameras backstage and shoot a reality show. And we found out about it. And that kind of got nixed really quickly because they were going to do it without our knowledge. So, because they could, because we had, signed a waiver when we went into Turner. So, yeah. So that would have been really interesting.
Yeah. So how do you think the television industry has changed over the years at all?
Actually, I think technology has totally, the technology has totally changed. It's, I mean, you think about it, you don't even have to, you could edit all your stuff on a laptop in your house if you wanted to now. We back then, you were worried with the quality and you can't do this and nobody cares anymore. I mean, for God's sake, they do they put videos on that have the low res and they're awful. And so, I mean, I think it's totally changed in the way we see things. And because we've got all this streaming now, I think, and YouTube with people creating their own content and TikTok, they're creating their own content. So I think now it's so much more accessible and people can, basically people can create their own brand and, do what they want to do. And they don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to be hired over here, because they can become an influencer, or they can just say, hey, I'm going to have my own YouTube channel, that kind of stuff. So, it's just different. Yeah. It's a lot different.
So if somebody wanted to get into the industry now, how would they do it? What would you tell them?
It's funny. I just had somebody ask me that. So, I mean, I think there's so many ways of getting into it. What I always used to tell my students is if you have the fire in your belly, you're going to make it. If you don't, bye-bye. Like if you're somebody who just wants to put props up behind you, like clapboards and stuff, and like, look, I'm playing at being in film, and you're not willing to put the work in, then forget it. You don't need to be in this field. And I'm not saying that in a cruel way, but if you want to get into the field, I think you really have to, this has to be something that you absolutely love, and that you will go the extra mile, the absolute extra mile to do what you want to do. So I think, there's a bunch of things you can do now. Like I'm in Atlanta, so they have, Staff Me Up, which they have all over the country. But, Staff Me Up has, you can go on there and get a gig for like 2 days or 5 days, depending on what gig you're looking for. And then there's stuff like, Mandy and, Indeed list stuff. And, in Atlanta there, the Georgia Film Commission, they have a job line that you can call, and they have they'll tell you when they need extras and all this kind of stuff. So I think that, it's become a lot more streamlined. I mean, you have to search it out. And honestly, I hate to say this, but I think nowadays, younger people for some reason don't know what Google is, and that, like get on Google and look, how can I get a job in TV production? And once, there'll be a ton of stuff that pops up. And I think you really have to search, and you have to really, you have to network, and you have to make connections. Like if you decide like, hey, I'm going to go PA for 2 days on this show, like make sure you talk to people, make sure, obviously you're not going up to the director being like, hey, what's going on? Make sure you talk to people like that are working with you and around you, and like, chat with them when you have lunch, like, hey, how did you get your start? My dad always used to tell me, when you're asking, always ask for advice, never ask for a job. Because if you ask for a job, that's an automatic turnoff. So, if you can network and get yourself going with some other people, I mean, that's the way most people get their job, So, and I think that, the more you network, it's like you don't even apply for a job anymore. Somebody's like, oh, hey, you're finished with this movie or this show. Okay, well, there's another one coming up in 2 weeks. Do you want to work on that too? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. And you book that. So I think people, I don't know if, I think sometimes some people are afraid of that. And some people are like, okay, I can do that. But I think it's a matter of being very, like I was a very shy person. So even if you're shy, it's just like, hey, if this is something you really want to do, go for it. Figure out every way you can talk to somebody about it, network, Google stuff, make sure that, you're saying like you want to do the job that, you actually want to do, and you actually know what that job is. Cause I've found a lot of people say, oh, I want to do this. And I'm like somebody told me they wanted to produce, a TV series. And I said, oh, so you're really good with money? And they're like, no, I'm a creative. And I'm like, producing is money in film and TV series. So, people need to know like what exactly they're talking about. And, the way to do that is you start at the bottom and you pay your dues. And I find sometimes people are not willing to do that.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So with all that, Christine, I just have 4 final questions for you.
Okay.
So what was the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Well, it was from my dad, and he told me, you can't complain about something until it actually affects your job. When it's affecting your job, then you have to go and complain about it. But if it's not affecting your job, you can't complain about it. And also, if you're going to complain about something, you need to go in with a solution, not just walk in with a complaint. So I kind of do that.
Love that. What's one thing on your bucket list?
Oh, there's so many. I'd like to go to Istanbul. I really would. But that's one thing I'd like to do. And I'd like to go. It's mostly travel stuff. I'd like to go to Rome. So I've been all over Italy, and I never got to Rome. So I'd really like to go there someday.
So when the toy companies finally get around to making an action figure of you, what 2 accessories will it come with?
A closet and lots of shoes.
And the last thing, Christine, how do people find you?
So on Instagram, you can find me at the Christine Johnson, or you can find me on Instagram at I have a thing about shoes. Huh. It's an Instagram page with all my shoes, with a bunch of shoes. I call it shoe porn. So absolutely.
And I know on a side note that, eventually you are going to be working on a book and hopefully a screenplay, because now I'm going to hold you to it.
Yes.
So-
I am working on a book right now. I've got about 225 pages done. So I'm working on that. Hopefully I'll have the first draft done by December. And then hopefully I'll go into revisions after that for a year. So yeah.
Does it have a title yet?
It does, but I don't want to say what it is right now.
Okay. All right. So then everybody stay tuned for Christine's book.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Please comment, like, or share this episode, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. For more information on how I can help you create your iconic image, visit marlanasemenza.com.